The President. Mr. Lee. Chairman, I speak to oppose to Mr. Fernando CHEUNG's, Mr. Nathan Law's, and Mr. Eddie Ju's amendments. The reasons are very clear. I oppose to them making use of this bill to add to the definition of relative, and I also oppose to their attack that has not been forewarned. I said that this unforewarned attack because this is the committee stage. This is a solemn process of the LEGCO. If we only focus on the other parts of the bill without paying attention to this part, perhaps unknowingly or unwittingly, you would support these amendments. Well, after the third reading, then under relatives, there will be 2 points added to it. That is, the AB, that is, the other party in a marriage, civil partner or civil union with the deceased in which that the other party and the deceased are of the same sex and was celebrated or contracted outside Hong Kong in accordance with the law in force at the time. So that means that it would in a way give recognition to same-sex marriage. That is the amendment, and it has not been widely consulted on and also widely discussed upon. So the amendment is not about being inclusive of the rights of minorities. It's about Hong Kong's current system and a recognized marriage system. That is one between one man and one woman. If they want to mount this ambush on us, it doesn't just affect our current marriage system. What is more important is that they have not respected the solemnness of the legislature. And you can't say that our marriage system can avoid another challenge. And if you add unnecessarily to the definition of relative, there will be the domino effect. If we allow this to be endorsed, it is very dangerous and it runs counter to our procedural justice. A lot of legislators and members of the public would very much like to see the endorsement of this bill. I know that the Secretary endeavors to try to minimize disputes and disagreements as far as possible. Well, I see that the bills introduced by this Secretary have been improved a lot, and I do understand that there is such a demand from people in the same-sex relationship, and I do think that the Secretary endeavors to try to meet their demand without causing a controversy of whether same-sex relationship or same-sex marriage is recognized in Hong Kong. So I support the proposal of the addition of related person, and I support the Secretary's amendment. I would like to make it clear that the administration has done their best to deal with the controversy, and they would like to try to strike a balance. People in a same-sex relationship that is celebrated outside Hong Kong, they would be able to claim the ashes through an authorized representative or personal representative. Of course, it doesn't fully address the difficulties faced by people in a same-sex relationship or some gay rights groups. But I don't think this is an appropriate time to introduce this controversial point. There has not been any discussion as to whether in Hong Kong same-sex marriage celebrated outside Hong Kong can be recognized. They have not thought about the domino effect, that it hasn't gone through extensive consultation and hasn't been properly discussed by the public. This will be really rushed. I remember back in 2015, an NPSC delegate of Hong Kong said that through Annex 3, the mainland security law can be given effect to operate in Hong Kong. And at that time, LC Leung said that there are two different systems between Hong Kong and the mainland. And under Article 18 of the Basic Law, there are restrictions as to the introduction of mainland laws. Only those that are related to foreign relationships and national defense can be introduced. That means even under the one country, two system, if you want to introduce a piece of legislation, it cannot be done without careful consideration, especially one that is very controversial. Those amenders that they keep talking about everything having to be compliant with the basic law, with all the laws, and are completely legal. As Ms. Leung said, that there are two different legal systems between Hong Kong and the mainland. Well, and as I've said, that when someone proposes the introduction of national laws under one country, two system, and when someone proposes an interpretation of the law, you need to think about what your reaction were at that time. And now you try to force this down the throat of members of the public to get a same-sex partner in a relationship celebrated outside Hong Kong to be recognized here. And I think it is double standard. I remember the Rainbow Action and also gay rights. It's been moving forward step by step. And if you want to make use of the private Columbaria bill to add to the definition of relatives, it is highly inappropriate. And it is not in line with a legislative process. And I would like to speak for people who staunchly support family values. The opposition, or sometimes there are people in the past who criticize them, saying that they are moral Taliban, that they discriminate against gay people, and that they are homophobic. Please do not call them these names. They are not moral Talibans. They understand that society is changing, and they fully understand the difficulties faced by homosexual people, but they are concerned that the core family value, that is a family formed by a husband and a wife, is being undermined. They are not religious radicals. They don't discriminate against homosexual people. They have never said anything about imposing restrictions or banning people falling in love with the same sex or being in a relationship with someone of the same sex. What they worried about is that it will have an impact on the children, that you can choose your gender. It is not, you're not born with it. This is not scaremongering. It's happening somewhere else in the world. These people are concerned that at schools, children may receive education saying that in the future you can choose whether you want to marry someone of your own gender or a different gender. We do understand the difficulties faced by homosexual people, but for the group of people who would like to defend family values of a husband and a wife, they are really scared. They don't want to restrict the freedom of others, but they don't want the society to turn into a place where messages of a family that is not a husband and a wife, that does not comprise of husband and wife, will be spread. So what I'm trying to say is that they should not try to do it through adding to the definition of relative under this bill. And I would like to reply to Mr. Ray Chan. It's not the case that this group of people refuse to budge. And you need to dispel their fear. If you can do that, they are very much willing to talk to you. I understand that people with a different sexual orientation, people who are homosexual, they face a lot of difficulties. But if you want to just jump to legalizing same-sex marriage without dispelling the fear of those who want to support traditional family value, then you won't be getting anywhere. And I would like to reply to Mr. A. Chan's amendment. Compared to Mr. Nathan Law's and Dr. Cheung's amendment, Mr. Chan did not introduce a same-sex spouse in a relationship celebrated outside Hong Kong into related person. He just wants to reduce the period of cohabitation to 1 year. It's only a matter of judgment. There is no right or wrong. I don't have to oppose to you, but I say that the administration's proposal is already quite relaxed. So by comparison, I would accept the administration's proposed 2 years. But as you've said at the outset, that is just like you're haggling 1 year or 2, and you have admitted that the focus is not 1 or 2 years. Your focus, as you said, was the order of priority, and I've given it some thought. If related persons only deals with same-sex partner, then yes, it's a matter of priority. But the reality is that it covers many different relationships, even someone who's merely living with the deceased. If the order of priority takes over relative, I am concerned that it will cause more controversy. If related person only deals with a same-sex relationship, then I would understand. But my understanding is that the scope is much wider than that. It covers someone who lives with you for 2 years. Well, in a dormitory, a lot of university students have been sharing the same room for over 2 years. And if that is allowed, and if your roommate passes away, you'll be able to go and claim his ashes. So I speak in opposition to these amendments. Thank you. Mr. Jonas Ho. I would like to clarify the metaphor I used, or the example I used, meant no disrespect to sexual minorities. Well, our current society advocates freedom and equality. As long as you have feelings for one another, it's fine. But yesterday, it was the committee stage of the private Columbaria bill. It's night and day with the topic of same-sex marital relationship. Dr. Fernando CHEUNG proposes to add under the definition of relative under Schedule 5, Section 6, Bracket 2, to include some same-sex spouse in civil partnership or civil union celebrated outside Hong Kong, it is not appropriate. As I said yesterday, that I commended the administration for taking a neutral and open stance. Related person has already catered for special circumstances. And I said that even without the new category of related person, it's legally possible for any bosom friends to deal with one's ashes as long as you get legal assistance from a lawyer. It's not like what people say here in this council from the Democrats, that if it is not passed in this way, is very unfair to certain people.
And this is really far-fetched. So yesterday, I highlighted the two different angles for members, and they're feasible. And this has accommodated the relevant situation. But some members tried to seize that opportunity to add this same-sex marriage celebrated overseas. It is my belief that we should not include this in the context of this bill. If members would like to discuss this properly, we should have a proper discussion in the context of the marriage ordinance, and there should be extensive consultation. Is only with a common ground for that we would pursue legislative amendment. I would accept general views. If there is a majority support here in this council, we can change the law. Nothing is cast in concrete. Any concept, any ideas can be changed with the passage of time. However, there are certain core values that cannot be compromised. I am speaking for the traditional and the majority views regarding conventional marriage institution. This is the traditional core value. And this is also the traditional family structure down through the ages. It is a marriage between a man and wife. That previously, in old days, we had a polygamy, but basically now it is a monogamy. And there used to be concubines and so on, but under the marriage ordinance, it is a marriage between a man and a woman who fall in love and get married. This is the law. We should not despise people's orientation, but if we want to impose their wishes on the majority, a lawful marriage is one between a man and a woman. That's the reality. Now you're trying to bring in the overseas celebrated marriage into Hong Kong, and this is something that can be considered for the future. It is inappropriate for us to do this in the context of Schedule 5.6.2. We cannot spring this on us because this is against the legislative amendment principle. I used the analogy of an old man and a wolf. People normally tend to take things out of context. We have our worries. We have our misgivings. If we're not talking about the legalization of same-sex marriage, I must state very clearly that it is my personal conviction that I would be against it. If we have a respectable debate in the council, I would accept the outcome of the debate. This is the right attitude in a democratic system. So I don't think my remarks are out of place. The Pan-Democratic members would just take things out of context and play things out of proportion. This is not the right attitude to adopt. Mr. Chairman, with these words, I object to the amendments made by Dr. Fernando CHEUNG and Mr. Nathan Law. Mr. Raymond Chen. Chairman, I must respond to Mr. Julius Ho. Yesterday, he said he used the story of an old man and the wolf. Today, he said that we're taking the easy way out. I hope that Mr. Julius Ho's speech can be posted on the web. This is a 50-minute clip. I hope that people from Hong Kong and Taiwan will have a listen to what he had to say. Now, he used the story of an old man and a wolf. He said that we cannot be compassionate to the wolf because this is an ungrateful wolf. Just now, he didn't explain why this doesn't contain an element of discrimination against the sexual minority. That to these animals, we shouldn't be compassionate. What's he trying to say? Mr. Julius Ho is not terribly well up in the process of the scrutiny. As he says, some members are trying to take the easy way out by taking advantage of the fair court case involving the government and try to bring in the overseas marriages celebrated overseas. Now, Ms. Sit Ho raised this last year, and there wasn't any case involving the immigration department official suing the government, so there wasn't an opportunity for us to take the easy way out. I'm grateful to Ms. Dari Lee, although I didn't agree with her for the first part, but for the latter part of her speech, she seems to be able to get to grips with the debate. Mr. Chairman, this private Columbaria bill, we're entering to the fifth segment, and this is about the definition of related person. And also in the priority enjoyed by the related person in the process of claiming the ashes. This is all about it. We're not debating the marriage ordinance in any shape or form. If you have any views about same-sex marriage, reservation, skepticism, and so on, there will be plenty of opportunity for you to air your views. I hope the administration will provide this platform. There should be a government-led platform for all parties for and against to air their views. I think this is a rehearsal of the debate today. The chairman should remind members not to stretch things too far and not to play things out of all proportion. Now, of course, it would be okay for them to mention this in passing, but I don't think this debate should be become one in which whether you express your support or disapproval of same-sex marriage. Now, you can have no position. You can be having a lot of misgivings. But today, we are debating whether we should have the door ajar for us to fit in the related person. Now, how big the gap should be, now this is really what we're talking about. Now, you say that the door cannot be kept ajar because there would be a Trojan horse, and the whole family concept would be crumbled. I think you are playing things out of all proportion. Mr. Lee has got a point that my amendment hasn't got any adjunct to the definition of relative. Now, the adjunct is all interpretation. I think in interpreting in scrutinizing all legislation, the government should always consider whether the definition of relative should be expanded. In fact, in many previous legislation that were scrutinized, we would add certain people who enjoy close to a relative status into the bills. Now, this is an improvement, although it is a minor improvement. The government should leave the door a little bit ajar for the related person, but the gap is very, very small, and the applicability is so narrow that it would be really a modest gap. It is in a life and death situation that the administration should not be so unsympathetic. In the fatal accidents ordinance, if you think that expanding the definition of a relative is a hanging crime, it is detrimental to the marriage concept, then you should take this fatal accidents ordinance to pieces. When this was endorsed, Hon Chow, Junius Ho, Priscilla Leung, they were not legislative members. I'm sure that if they were, they would have voted against this. Section 4 is about the death of a relative. The death of a relative, and someone is trying to seek compensation. Can same-sex partner be allowed to, if there is someone, if my husband who has been living with me for 30 years, now under the fatal accidents ordinance, I can, but it is only in the situation of a death of the partner. So after, if someone has been residing in the same premises for 2 years or more, immediately before death, as if it is a husband and wife relationship. Now, this priority is higher than parents. Now, this is really subverting the traditional marriage institution. But this is something we have to do in a civilized society. A partner certainly will enjoy closer relationship than parents or even siblings. So after children, they added as if they were in a married couple relationship. Why 2 years? 2 years in this ordinance is a rarity. Why 2 years? That's because one has to seek compensation for the fatal accident. I would appreciate the length of time, but the compensation can be millions and millions of dollars. It would be different from claiming the ashes. Now, I'm claiming the ashes instead of taking the jewelry in the deposit box. Now, even if there is a litigation, mysteriously, I am trying to put the related person to the same level as a relative. Now, this is the same as even the distant relative. And certainly there will be litigation. But if someone has the marriage certificate, the judge would be able to judge who is closer. Fatal accidents ordinance is case in point, and also DCRVO is also another case in point that was very much in dispute. Some said that those in the same-sex relationship should not be protected. Should they be allowed to be beaten to death without any protection? So after a lot of debates, the cohabitation relationship would be allowed. Now, if two people, whether same sex or different sex, if they enjoy the courting couple relationship, it doesn't matter whether it is heterosexual or homosexual. It doesn't impose any kind of length of period. It doesn't say 1 year or 2 years before you would be able to enjoy the protection against domestic violence. Now, for these life and death situation, of course, there shouldn't be any imposition of duration. The third example, that in 2012, the members also passed this.
But most members were dreaming away. They were not. Most of them were not in the council, and the president only make a ruling based on his estimation, and that is the electronic health record ordinance. The secretary was here. He thought it would be better to adopt a low profile and did not ask for division. And that is when you cannot make a decision or a certain decision on medical care, who can take your place in making the judgment? Can a partner, same-sex partner or cohabitee make the decision for you? So the decision maker has include this category. A person who lives with the subject person. At the time, that person is accompanying the patient in question. Again, this is a life and death situation. A patient cannot make a decision for himself, and this other person is given the right to make a decision on his behalf. And as Mr. Junius Ho and Ms. Starry Lee are saying that if we allow these amendments to be passed in the context of private Columbarian bill, well, you would open the floodgate. But what about these other ordinances? Fatal accidents, electronic health records ordinance. When were they passed? Has there been any problem? Has there been any flooding? We are asking just for a little right. Asking for a little right. Mr. Junius Ho is saying that you cannot give them just this right because they would try to get more. They would get your house. They may even kill you for in order to take over your properties. Therefore, we must hold the ground. We must safeguard the core value of family. So I have this question for Mr. Hon Chow. What is the most important thing in the value of family? You keep talking about how you teach your children. I'm more concerned how you are going to teach your children than how gay people would do the same to their children. Well, you will be telling your children that it's okay to cheat unless you're found. Or you can just simply tell them that such rights of homosexual people are recognized in many countries, and it's going to happen in Taiwan. Which is more important, that it should be a heterosexual relationship or is a relationship of love? Well, if you have a brother, a sibling, who is a homosexual person, it's not a sickness, it's not an anomaly. Would you like that sibling to have a long-lasting relationship with another one, or to sleep with different people every night? Well, people have different values. So my question is for you yourself. What is the value of family to you, according to the UK Court of Appeal judge? We're talking about, this is about a long, lasting, stable relationship. When the Liberal Party held up this banner to safeguard family value, And I query what sort of family value that they would really uphold. And don't let me find out that some of you have mistresses or extramarital affairs. I'll tell Apple daily. We may have different values. You have your values, but how come your values can be affected by my marrying someone? The values are not should be developed in the course of our community development. Dr. Lau Siu Lai, my speech is not going to be long. For 2 days, I have noticed something strange. We have people exaggerating things, taking things up to a very far-fetched level. And many people are talking about homosexual marriage. But here, under this bill, we are talking about a very narrow and restricted right, and that is the right to claim ashes by a same-sex partner. Well, I have to declare my position that I support homosexual marriage. If I'm to talk about why I support it, I may have to speak for 15 minutes. But now we're talking about just an amendment that would grant a right to someone who had celebrated homosexual marriage or civil partnership or civil union outside Hong Kong, and whether that person could be given the right to claim the ashes of the loved one. Maybe they are here to filibuster, to buy time, and therefore many of them are not really calm in advancing their arguments, and so they make analogies of rules and the like. Let me say something about my views of the private Columbarian bill first. Are we going to open the door for something which will be gradually erode the definition of marriage, and to bring in homosexual marriage into our system? Well, actually, there are many ordinances with provisions which grant rights to same-sex partners, such as Section 4(2)(e) of the Fatal Accidents Ordinance. And if a same-sex couple have been living for 2 years, then they will be regarded as having a relative relationship. So, if we are to do it now under this bill, we are not making any breakthrough. We are just aligning the arrangement with the Fatal Accidents Ordinance, because they will be regarded as someone enjoying a lower priority to relatives. And also Cap 23, Section 1D2. For people who have been living together for 2 years as if they were husband and wives, they would enjoy the same rights to claim compensation and to initiate proceedings. So even if we are to accept the CSAs, we are not opening up anything to homosexual relationship. Hong Kong is a civilized community. Although we don't have anything for homosexual marriage, this is controversial. It's okay, but we have these people in our community, and they should be afforded certain rights which are also recognized under other ordinances. So why do they want to suppress these people's rights? And now the government is willing to give way, and still the rights are inferior than those in other ordinances. So I can't understand why, unless they have been ordered to conduct a filibustering exercise. According to the recent court judgment, the judge did not accept homosexual marriage, and the judges said that the case did not in any way undermine the institution of marriage in Hong Kong. But the royalists keeps talking about traditions, traditional marriage, and I'm just trying to engage everyone in a rational discussion. And Mr. Junius Ho and other members, but they might not do it intentionally, but it's just their habit, saying that this is a traditional Chinese value. We cannot accept homosexual marriage. Although I support homosexual marriage, I agree. I do agree that there must be thorough discussion in the community and this council before we say yes to homosexual marriage. But in the traditional Chinese marriage concept, it's not one man and a man and a woman, husband and wife for life. The traditional marriage of China is to have one man and many wives, and the husband can send any wife away. Well, it was only in 1971 that a colonial government enacted the present system we have, a colonial legacy, if I may put it like that. Don't say that this is a Chinese, traditional Chinese value, that you want to have one man and one woman in a marital relationship. It's just been around for 40 years. And marriage system is something that's subject to changes over time. And in the past, a man had many wives. The wives can be expelled on various grounds, and they have the men had concubines. And now we have changed to the present system for 40 years. And of course, if we want to make further changes, such as by accepting homosexual marriage, that is not impossible. And yesterday we learned from Taiwan that there will be a breakthrough in Taiwan. But that's the subject for another debate. But don't tell us that for Chinese tradition is one man and one woman in a marital relationship for life. Of course, we can always learn from other places to see whether our marriage system should continue to evolve. But this is not the subject before us. We're talking about same-sex couples who had celebrated marriage or homosexual marriage elsewhere, and whether the surviving same-sex partner should be given the right to claim the ashes. It's not really about our marriage system. So why don't we reserve our opinion? Say we can have a debate for 60 hours when it's time to discuss our marriage system, and don't just say that it's a Chinese tradition or homosexual marriage would pose the biggest challenge to the traditional marriage system. Even the Pope said that the same homosexual people are the staunchest supporter of the marriage system because they want to be part of it. According to a U.S. scholar who had research into marriage system for some 60 years, he looked at 300 couples with extramarital affairs. And the biggest challenge is from extramarital affairs. And the main cause of the problem is office romance. Because every day you come into contact with your colleagues, and you understand your colleagues, and gradually you know them better than you know your spouse. So that's the cause of the problem. If we want to better protect our marriage system, we should have standard working hours so that you have more time staying at home and take care of your family members.
I agree with Mr. Ray Chan. The core of a marriage is the commitment towards one another and also mutual support. If you have to work long hours, you won't be able to get support from your partner. The people who support you most will be your colleagues. That's why office affairs have become the greatest challenge to monogamy. That's according to a survey. I find it very strange that it's the Liberal Party that advocates monogamy between a man and a woman. If that is the case, then then they should support standard working hours. I'm not going to digress too far. I really want to debate about same-sex marriage, but this is not an appropriate platform. I just want to go over the points raised by some other members. Some members said that, well, if you instill these ideas into the heads of children, that it's all right to have a relationship with someone of the same sex, how are you supposed to teach your children? What is that? What are you saying? Well, you don't have to teach your children that a relationships between a man and a woman or a man and a man. Just say it's when two people love each other. That is one of the things advocated by Chairman Mao. Chairman Mao wanted to do away with a lot of old things. One of the things is to say, well, you don't say it's your husband or your wife. Simply, you just say it's your lover, Iron. Well, if you meet someone who were born in the 50s or 60s, then they will say, well, my loved one has gone back to China. Instead of saying my husband or my wife. That is what Chairman Mao said. I thought you follow the teachings of Chairman Mao and you follow the teaching of the Communist Party. So you only have to say your loved one. If you don't know how to teach your children, go back and read about what Chairman Mao said, because he meant to do away with all things. Even if you follow the teaching of Marxism, you will realize that according to Marxism, well, monogamy between a man and a woman is only transitional. In the end, everything will become a socialist society. So it's only about a marriage. It doesn't say anything about a man and a woman. What I'm trying to say is that everything changes. Economy comes first, and then marriage comes after. Changes. There will be changes to the marriage system, whether it is Canada, US, Australia, the teaching of the CCP or Marxism. They are all subject to challenges, and they are to be discussed upon, but not here, because we're only talking about a limited scope. That is, whether the ashes can be claimed by a spouse in a same-sex relationship well, a spouse in a relationship that is celebrated overseas is someone who's very close to the deceased and who enjoys the status of a relative. I understand that the administration's amendment will come first, but I support Mr. Ray Chan's amendment. Well, I will need many 15 minutes to talk about same-sex marriage, but I would like to emphasize that this is not the platform. So if members would like to filibuster, please think carefully. Do not liken homosexual people with beasts and say that traditional family value is a monogamy between a man and a woman. Mr. Kwok-hung. Well, the court judgment in Taiwan stated very clearly that the relevant legislative yuan will have to legislate to protect the freedom of same-sex marriage. But today we're not here to talk about that. Mr. Junius Ho said that, well, it was only talking about wolf. I think he's talking about us. He used the word beast, and I think actually, well, the story itself was mentioned in the Dreams of the Red Chamber, and Chairman Mao mentioned about this as well. And there was a saying that mentioned this tale that one changes and becomes fickle. This story and this verse actually is about someone who changes suddenly when the situation changes. I say that Mr. Ho's wrong. Miss Priscilla Leung is not here. I don't know why she's not here today. She said at the top of her voice yesterday, that overseas same-sex marriage, if given the capacity to claim ashes in Hong Kong, that means it is a recognition of the relationship. And what's bad about this? She said, well, that means you will marry someone of the same sex, and then you marry someone of a different sex. I thought she's a legal professor. Well, but if someone married 2 times, that means it's bigamy. That person commits bigamy. If you marry someone of the different sex in Hong Kong and someone of the same sex overseas, it's bigamy. And it's because of the marriage system that one can commit bigamy. I don't know whether Miss Leung just had a slip of tongue. It's not the case that, well, with heterosexual marriage, then there is a bigamy. No, when there is a marriage system, there will be bigamy. Does it mean that, well, if there is bigamy, then we should do away with the marriage system? It's a problem with her logic. What she was trying to say is that if you recognize overseas marriage, whether it is same-sex or not, there is a chance that there will be bigamy because one may register marriage in 2 different places. If that's actually what she was saying, I think she should quit her job. She's not cut out to be a law professor. It's because there is a marriage system, then there is bigamy. When overseas, you said that in overseas there is a de facto marriage in Hong Kong and there is one registered. It has nothing to do with whether it's same-sex marriage or not. If someone minds to commit bigamy, then he or she would do it. And according to Ms. Leung, then the marriage system should be done away with because it will give rise to bigamy. Have you thought about this? Are you too thick to think about this? And you said that when same-sex marriage is recognized overseas, what we're saying is that, well, will Hong Kong recognize the de facto marriage here when it comes to claiming of the ashes? And that's the Ms. Sit-Ho's amendment. If we do recognize if we do give such a status to that person only in relation to claiming of ashes, what problem will there be? The marriage has been recognized overseas. We did not ask those people to get married here. It's something recognized in a different jurisdiction. The person got married overseas, and they come to Hong Kong to ask to be recognized as a relative. And if what you say stands, that means marriages recognized overseas should not be recognized here at all, even when it's heterosexual. You have to make it clear. You have to make it loud and clear. So it's abundantly clear that it won't give rise to any problem. And we only limit it in the scope of claiming of ashes. What's so special about it? And another point about, well, teaching your children about a bad way. We're only talking about obtaining a right that is accessible to everyone regardless of your sexual orientation. It's a right that is available to everyone in the whole spectrum. Well, if there is a same-sex marriage, if there is a legal same-sex marriage here, then they immediately will have that right. We oppose to discrimination, because by discriminating them, you take away some of their rights. That's why we have to do it step by step. When we deal with the rights of same-sex marriage, we will have another debate. We did not say that heterosexual people should not have the right. No, we respect the right. We only ask for the rights to be given to some others. Does it mean that the rights of the minority has been taken from the right of the minority? No. Well, it happens, but it's in a distorted election. Say, for example, a small group of people are able to elect for the chief executive, and by this way, they take away the rights of the majority. That's our system here. And this problem is not fairly dealt with, and will not be fairly dealt with. And that's what's happening here. Say, for example, when we discuss about universal suffrage, we say that civil nomination is indispensable because it is the right to stand in an election. You came from nowhere, and you chose 1,200 people, and they could vote. And you said that, well, your party leader can vote. We only asked for civil nomination, but you rejected it. You wouldn't even give us that. For those who are watching this debate, look at how these people treat the minority, then you understand the pettiness of the minds of these people. Look at how they treat those without power. Even my amendment, we're only asking for an order of priority. Have you read the bill? They said, well, if you allow someone who's been living with the deceased for 2 years to claim the ashes, then that means it would be like the magpie who flies in and takes away what's legally yours. Well, you may say, if there are two people or more who say that I've been living with the deceased and I would like to get the ashes, then you have to go to court. There are only 4 types of people: an authorized representative, personal representative. They are designated personalities. And if someone designates the same-sex partner to claim the ashes, it's specified. Or the personal representative, that is the will executor, is the same-sex partner. Do you think these 2 people should get the ashes? Does it mean that it encourages same-sex marriage? According to you, that should not be allowed in the first place.
What do you mean by authorized representative and personal representatives? You don't recognize them? And we're talking about a gay couple. One of them died, and the other one tries to claim the ashes. And to want to penalize him, now what we're asking for is the right that is enjoyed by everybody should not be denied to any person just because of his sexual orientation. It can be a heterosexual cohabiting couple. It can be anything else, and they are so irrational when they heard of this. And if this is not homophobic, what is it? And they're becoming incoherent. We're not talking about anything else here. What we are debating is, in this world, there is same-sex romance, and do they have the right to have a family? If they have the right to have a family, should the close relationship be recognized in modern-day society? Is this a lasting, genuine relationship? If it is, then should they be entitled to the right that is enjoyed by other people? It is not an overriding right. And this is a modest request. Like heterosexual marriage, some said that this is not a legitimate relationship and someone doesn't have the right. Now, there may be some people, like Dr. Lau Solai said, had it not been for 1971, the Qing law was abolished, people are still keeping concubines. Now, under the Qing law, people practice polygamy. I think this is hilarious. Mr. Holden Chow, you said that this is compromising morals. This is bad for morals. What about prostitution? You don't have any encumbrances of a family, and you go up to Dongguan and have a look for yourself. The Marxists said that this is even worse than polygamy. Why don't you pontificate about this and try to get this abolished? If you want to maintain a marriage for life, Mr. Wong Ting-kwong, have you been using prostitution? In Dongguan, everything is happening, and the women are being exploited. And this is really polygamy. Those who patronize prostitutes, I think they are damaging the marriage institution. So you have to listen properly. All amendments, all three amendments are for a good reason. It's just that the administration doesn't want to concede, and we will be voting the wrong way round. I hope that the pro-establishment members would think long and hard about it. You should be in support of one of the amendments at least. Thank you. Dr. Fernando CHEUNG. Chairman. In the previous 3 rounds of speeches, I've already explained my amendments and also my position on the other CSAs. I have already highlighted all the misgivings arising from the amendments, and I've addressed all of them. Today I heard all these warped arguments advanced by the pro-establishment members. I feel obligated to respond to them. Now, Ms. Dara Lee said that this is a stealth attack, and she's saying that without any public consultation and public discussion, we are springing this upon members. We'd like to add the same-sex marriages or civil union celebrated in other jurisdictions in the definition of relative, and this is undermining the traditional family values. And more importantly, she said that this is a stealth attack, and we're springing this upon members. Now, I'm not sure whether Ms. Dara Lee is a new member. She's been a member since the year 2008, 2009. We had the amendment of the domestic violence ordinance. Yesterday, I said again that between 2004 and 2008, during that term, I was chairman of this Bills Committee, and we tried to expand the scope of family in the definition so that the ordinance could protect more people. And we omitted the same-sex cohabitation relationship, and whether these kind of relationships should be protected. We thought they should, and the administration agreed, but in the absence of time, the administration gave the undertaking that the legislation would be amended again in the next term. Mr. Dara Lee came in during that term, and the amendment to that ordinance gave rise to a lot of controversy. I don't propose to repeat the arguments advanced by Dr. Priscilla Leung and all the religious groups and all their concerns. All these concerns never come to pass. Mr. Dara Lee was there at the time. Now for this amendment, this all started last term. There was Ms. Sit Ho who raised this. Where was Ms. Dara Lee? Wasn't there any discussion in the community? Weren't there any statements? The True and Light Association put out a statement. The Catholic Diocese also put out a statement. Is it true that we brought this up for discussion yesterday, a stealth attack? I think this is wholly absurd. Mr. Jun's Ho said that we saw the report from Taiwan, and then we decided to shove this in for an amendment. You sound as if you are a new member. Is this the way we work? Just because we saw something happen in other jurisdictions doesn't mean that we can spring this on the council all of a sudden. We do have the due process. If Mr. Ho is not clear about this, he should read the Hansard. The Bills Committee has already highlighted all these amendments. There was the minutes dated the 24th of March, and Mr. Gary Chan made a report to the House Committee in his capacity as chairman of the Bills Committee, the Taiwan court verdict came down on April the 28th. I think we have to be careful in our words. We cannot say that this is a stealth attack without any consultation. I think this is a warped argument. Mr. Lee also said that we're trying to bring in some highly controversial definition. If this goes on, the family values will be eroded. I'm grateful to Mr. Raymond Chan. He said that this exists in many different ordinances. The Fatal Accidents Ordinance, the DCRVO, Domestic Cohabitation Violence Ordinance, and the EHR, the Electronic Health Information Ordinance. Now, in these ordinances, they mention the same-sex cohabitation relationship. Now, DCRVO and Fatal Accidents Ordinance and this private Columbaria bill, why do we want to expand the scope of protection? To relationship not recognized by the marriage ordinance, or some relationship that is close to being like a marriage relationship. We want to give them protection because of humanitarian spirit. We've been talking about for umpteenth times, but I have to say again that this is the surviving spouse or surviving partner who, with the passage of the bill, may face the closure of a columbarium, and he or she would need to collect the ashes. And we're giving them this legitimate right. We're not doing anything to recognize the status. We are merely talking about a specific situation. Like Mr. Raymond Chan said, that a person has died. It's only in extreme sorrow and difficult situation that someone would get some kind of protection, like in the context of the Fatal Accidents Ordinance and the DCRVO. We cannot deny this kind of relationship. You cannot say that by writing this into the law, we recognize the relationship. But how can you say that homosexual romance doesn't exist? Can you say that we cannot recognize the existence of the gay relationship? We appreciate that they are finding themselves in difficult situations. If we don't allow them some room, their rights are likely to be deprived of. So you should not take it out of all proportion and call this a reverse discrimination. Do you allow the ashes to be claimed by only a certain people? If you allow these people to claim the ashes, then it would be reverse discrimination. Now, there was a concern expressed about showing a bad example for the kids. The kids would be taught the fact that they can choose the gender, they can choose the sexual orientation. If I give you the right, would you make a choice? What choice do you make? Chairman, if you ask me, I mean, it would be hard for me to love people of the same gender as me. I find it hard to do so. by allowing them to claim the ashes, you will make children love either men or women when they grow up. I think this is a really absurd the way you're presenting your arguments. Like Dr. Lau Silai said, we are not debating whether same-sex marriage should be legalized. We're merely saying that in terms of claiming of ashes, you should not relegate the position of the same-sex partners lower than the relatives.
If you suggest that this is giving a very bad lesson to children, well, we should teach our children that we should not discriminate against people with different sexual orientation. And under this bill, these people will be given equal rights. And we think under such circumstances, we should treat them humanely. Although under the laws of Hong Kong, this relationship is not recognized, although it's recognized in some other countries. We don't even have any law to prohibit discrimination on the ground of sexual orientation. Although the EOC has advocated this, the government is having nothing of it. But now we are only talking about giving these people equal rights to the making of a claim for ashes. I think a debate on homosexual marriage should be a different subject. Members, we have had a very long debate on this, and some members have spoken a number of times already. And of course, it's been suggested that sometimes we have digressed. For those who have spoken many times, please make sure that you do not repeat your arguments. Let's return to the subject of this debate. Mr. Hon CHAN CHI-chuen, thank you for your reminder, Chairman. If we continue like this, we'll fall into the trap set by the pro-establishment members, because they want to filibuster. They don't want us to have a debate on the June 4th incident, or on the motion to censure the CE. I asked this question on the education ordinance, and I asked what is meant by educational course. And then Dr. Yu asked whether a debate in this council counts as an educational course, and the secretary said no. But in fact, we are here to disseminate some information. It's a kind of education. We're sort of inspiring people. What are we talking about? The pro-establishment members are spreading a culture of fear. I refer to something said by Lu Xun, saying that this is really outrageous to engage in far-fetched interpretation. Lu Xun, in one of his articles, say that when a Chinese person sees short sleeves, he immediately imagines nakedness, a sexual act, and sexual indiscretion, and so on and so forth. So I've been criticized for citing this passage. Why so serious? Why quoted Lu Xun? And Hollywood would do as an example, because according to the pro-established members, this is like a disaster film. If we allow the CSAs to include same-sex partners, well, hell will break loose. A small relaxation, opening the door a little bit will lead to the untold disasters and dire consequences. This is what I call a culture of fear. In Hollywood films, they are based on the same theme. Recurrently, it may be the attack on September 11th. It may be SARS. They are talking about. They're all about our stress. But you are now dealing with your stress by spreading a culture of fear. This is a book, Mr. Siu, as I have reminded members. Please don't digress. Please return to the subject of the current debate. Oh yes, the subject is the private Columbarian bill and the definition of a related person and priorities of competing claims. And in this argument, in this debate, there are people trying to spread a culture of fear. We're not talking about ashes. These people are spreading fear. A socialist called Frank Faridi states this in a book, that the Western culture is now dominated by a culture of fear, and that is a belief that human nature is being undermined by the very destructive forces. And we are talking about technology, GM food, and then moral values. Mr. Siu, once again, may I remind you, if you do not return to the subject of our debate, I will have to ask you to stop. One of the ways to spread the culture of fear was I support this, but a lot of provisos. I would do this, but I understand that gay people should be given equal rights, but so the proviso should be nothing but love. I support the CSAs because of nothing but love. Everything else is superfluous. As for how we should teach our children, some are saying that we would not know how to teach our children. And I believe the government should expeditiously conduct an exercise to consult people on legislation to prohibit discrimination on the ground of sexual orientation. We do not have the right platform to have a discussion. In social work, there's a method called effective parenting. Let me demonstrate. For establishment members, I don't like your homophobia attitude. Don't do it. Face this pluralistic society. Face the reality. I know you can do it. There are 5 steps. First of all, identify the counterparty. Second, identify the problem. And then thirdly, create the silence and the stress. And then point out what should be done to improve it. And then you can do it. Don't fear homosexual people. Don't spread the culture of fear. For establishment members, accept the social reality. Accept social changes. You now keep talking about one man and one woman and a husband and a wife. You no longer talk about a marriage for life. Accept it. Mr. Holden Chow, Chairman. First of all, I must rebut what Mr. Leung Kwok-hung has said, which in my view is misleading and wrong. Who is creating fear? Mr. Leung Kwok-hung was creating fear. He kept saying that same-sex couples could not claim the ashes. Therefore, we must accept the CSAs moved by the opposition members in order by expanding the definition of relative and related person to include same-sex couples whose marriage have been celebrated outside Hong Kong. He kept saying that if we do not accept this, these same-sex couples will have no access to or no chance to claim the ashes. This is creating fear. The fact is just the opposite. If we look at the bill and the priorities, same-sex couples can at least await themselves to 2 channels to claim the ashes. First, the surviving partner can be an authorized representative, number 1. And then secondly, the definition to be introduced by the government on a related person would include a cohabitee, a cohabitee for 2 years, whether same sex or opposite sex. That would already address the problem of Mr. Leung's. So there's no question of same-sex partners not being able to claim the ashes if the CSAs are not accepted. He kept saying that this is a very modest request. This is misleading. This is an attempt to cheat the TV audience. Let me say this again. If for same-sex couples, there are at least 2 ways to make a claim. Either the partner is an authorized representative, or through the government's definition on a related person, they are covered. And anyone who had been in cohabitation with the deceased partner, that will be covered. And the claim can be made on this basis. So problem solved. I heard again from Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, who said this is not a stealth attack, not an ambush. It's not something we are trying to slip in surreptitiously. And they said that we should not be talking about homosexual marriage. But Chairman, I have to point out that the opposition members are always self-contradictory in their arguments. This attempt to introduce the CSAs to expand the definition of related person and relatives by taking on board homosexual marriage celebrated outside Hong Kong. They are trying to indirectly legalize homosexual marriage in Hong Kong. It's because they are trying to do this. They are preparing as a next step to try to get homosexual marriage recognized. We have to point out that this is going to happen and the consequences of doing this. If we accept the opposition members' CSAs in the future, very quickly, we'll have to face the granting, the beginning of the granting of legal recognition to homosexual marriage. But they are saying that today we'll be just talking about ashes. We should not be talking about the legalization of gay marriage, although that's the intention. They don't want you to talk about legalization of gay marriage. Well, can I? So are you just so weak in your argument that you do not want to have a discussion of the consequences of legalizing gay marriage? I subscribe to the views expressed by Ms. Starry Lee. This is a stealth attack, an indirect attempt to introduce the definition of relative and related person by supporting the homosexual marriage or by granting legal status to homosexual marriage celebrated outside Hong Kong.
I describe the amendments from the opposition as superfluous. There is a solution to the problem as I have outlined. There is already a solution. There is no need to go down that road. If they know full well that there is a solution, that same-sex partners can, through authorized representative or the definition of related person, claim the ashes, why do they still have to go ahead with the amendments? If this is not superfluous, if this is not an ambush, what do you call it? Just now, Ms. Starry Lee said that it's an ambush. That's right. And now they come out to say that this is not an ambush. Don't say that. What do you call it if it is not an ambush? What it is? If it's not an ambush, what is it? If this is not their support of same-sex marriage, legalizing same-sex marriage in an indirect way, what is it? And a member said that in the fatal accident ordinance, there are already provisions saying that under, the claimant can be a same-sex partner. And I would like to say that the fatal accident ordinance is different from this bill because under the fatal accident ordinance, there are two concepts, claimant and also a beneficiary or one that is supported. The one who is supported may, on behalf of the deceased, claim compensation. That's why there is a requirement of closeness. And I understand why in the fatal accident ordinance there is the provision to stipulate that the person has to be living with the deceased, because it may involve a large sum of compensation. But I would like to say that the fatal accident ordinance is different from this private Columbaria bill, and I would like to point it out. We have been discussing it for a very long time. There is indeed another important point. Same-sex partner in a marriage recognized overseas, we know that they are married overseas. Does it mean that we have to make use of this bill, make use of the amendment to indirectly introduce same-sex marriage into Hong Kong to give it recognition? Yes, I am aware that the persons registered in a same-sex marriage overseas. Does it mean that we have to indirectly give it legal status in Hong Kong and even enjoy the rights of a spouse enjoyed here in Hong Kong? We have to give it careful thought. As per the request of the chairman, we have to stick to the point. The amendments of the opposition, if we were to accept them, I'm afraid that the result is to give legal status to same-sex marriage that there will be a recognition of same-sex marriage. That will be an inevitable outcome. So I would like to make it clear. I so submit, Madam Deputy. Mr. Stephen Ho. Thank you, Madam Deputy. I share some of the views of Mr. Holden Chow. However, Mr. Holden Chow insists that in the future same-sex marriage should not be legalized and that same-sex marriage should not exist in Hong Kong. I don't know about the future, and at the moment I don't oppose to it. What I am saying is that nowadays may not be the right time to allow that. But I still have the same impression that the opposition, like Mr. Leung Kwok-hung, just framed us, saying that we're homophobic. I myself am not homophobic. I and some others agree that there may be something like this in Hong Kong in the future. But indeed, there are too many controversies in Hong Kong that show us that we should not support Mr. Ray Chan's amendment and oppose to Dr. Fernando CHEUNG's amendment, and that we should support the administration's amendment because Dr. CHEUNG's amendment introduced the concept of same-sex marriage celebrated overseas into Hong Kong. Yesterday, a lot of members cited the Taiwan example, the court ruling. And I would like to make it clear, it's not the case that we have to follow what Taiwan does. We have the basic law. Taiwan has their own constitution. Yeah, well, you can take it to court and we can exchange ideas. I don't mind touching on that point, but we don't need to get bogged down on that. Someone talked about monogamy between a husband and a wife, and some members talked about the inadequacies because there are people in a marriage but at the same time have many different relationships committing adultery. And we have seen a lot of lawsuits saying that the husband passed away and that the mistress came out to try to fight for the estate. We see there are mistresses living with different people, with many different lovers. Does it mean that we have to include them all as well? Yes, love is big. But there are differentials in love. But some people think that they're able to love different people, and there is so much love that it can be given to different people. Does it mean that we have to cater for that that kind of person? But we have to include it in the bill. It's not the case that we try to challenge the marriage system of just monogamy between a man and one man and one woman. And Mr. Leung said that is a very humble request just to allow some people to claim the ashes. We do agree. That's why we support the administration's amendment, because there are ways to deal with the situation. As Mr. Holden Chow said, some other members said that well, there are similar legislation and they haven't affected Hong Kong. Say, for example, the domestic and cohabitation relations violence ordinance. When the bill was being scrutinized, I wasn't here. I agree that cohabitation relations should be included because violence should not be tolerated and the relationship does not affect other people. But that is different from this bill. If we include same-sex relationship under related person, Well, that is under Dr. Cheung's amendment, under the definition of relative, it will affect the rights of other people. Some people may argue that, well, they are just like any other relative. What we're trying to say is, Mr. Ho, please pause there. What is the point of order, Mr. Leung? Well, can a member speak when he doesn't know anything about the ordinance? Please don't interrupt. It is not a point of order. Sorry, I just can't recall the name of that piece of legislation. Where was I? Mr. Leung, please sit down, because this is not for members themselves to talk to each other. I think he likes to interrupt. The logic is that if we admit that there is such relationship, and if it doesn't affect the current values of Hong Kong or family relations, then I don't mind. Include it all you want. But if it's affected, then it may not be appropriate in this day and age in Hong Kong. So the Democrats, please refrain from saying that loyalists are homophobic or that we don't recognize this group of people. Please do not pin any labels on us. There are already mechanisms to deal with people who are in a same-sex relationship. They can claim the ashes of the partner who is of the same sex. And Mr. Holden Chow said, Hong Kong people have discerning eyes, but we have to explain very carefully, and so that they won't just listen to one side of the story. For the marriage ordinance, I don't think is for Mr. Dr. Cole, the secretary, to deal with. I so submit. Mr. Roy Kwong. Madam Deputy. On one hand, the loyalists said that we should not pin them labels, that they should not be put in the same group as homophobic people. However, we heard what Holden Chow said. They have elevated to a completely different level. We're here to talk about the private Columbaria bill. No matter how far you try to stretch it, no one here is talking about legalizing same-sex marriage. We're only talking about when someone passes away. Well, your lover passes away. The thing itself is tragic, but we're only here to talk about claiming the ashes. But some people say, well, this will cause a lot of controversy. Don't even allow that to happen. There is nothing about legalizing same-sex marriage. We're not talking about this, but you started it, and then you said, don't do this. But this is not the way to engage in a debate. My eyes are completely open listening to this debate. Yesterday, Junior's host started off with that tale of a wolf. I think Junior's host has been putting his foot in his mouth a lot lately. And yesterday he talked about how can you be kind to a beast after another faux pas before. Well, there are members here who advocate animal rights. Well, you advocate the rights of animal. What about, let alone human being? You should not use the term beast, and you should not say, well, how you should not be kind to a beast. You don't have to say something like this. You only have to listen to what was said yesterday. You would very easily be able to tell who he was referring to. This is a political debate. You don't have to suppress the sexual minorities, but to win applause and support. We're only talking about the Columbaria, private Columbaria bill. It's sad already when someone passes away. Why don't you show a little bit more kindness? What do we ask for today? It's a very humble request. Someone dies, there are ashes. Can I be the surviving partner to claim the ashes? But now, no. You elevate it to a completely different level. This is opening the gate of same-sex marriage. I'm not going to enter that debate, not today, but I'll always be ready. We're only talking about this bill. We're only talking about reason. You treat same-sex as people who are homosexual as non-existent, that they are beasts. How dare you call Hong Kong an advanced, mature, and civilized society? What kind of speech was that?
Madam Deputy, we're not launching a stealth attack on members. We're not spraying anything on members. It sounds as if there is some kind of ulterior motive. Now, we're not doing anything remotely like that. And you're saying that if the partner of a same-sex marriage passes away, then the surviving partner can claim the ashes. Mr. Hon Chow is making the speech, and I think it would be like in the old days when people were framed for what they said. What wrongdoing has someone committed? We're talking about the partner of a same-sex relationship, and this is played up to be some kind of a hanging offense. I feel very bad about it. I must reiterate that we're not debating legalization of same-sex marriage. Please do not give us this red herring. We're merely talking about the fundamental entitlement. Everyone is born equal. Everyone has the freedom to pursue freedom and happiness, and to maintain, to protect these rights. We build the government, and the power of the government comes from the people, and everybody is born equal. We don't want to rub salt to the wound. We don't want to have any remarks that attacking the sexual minority. They are suffering a raw deal. You don't have to tell us the story about a wolf, and you don't have to compare them to the wolf. They're not the wolf. The wolf will be here with us for a month or so. During this whole, they are not wolves. You have to have a sense of proportion. It doesn't matter if you hold different political views. Those who are witnessing this debate, I mean, these people, I don't know what wrong they have done. Members are merely trying to allow them to have the right to claim the ashes. And this is the last thing they want to get. Of course, they don't want to get the ashes, but if Hong Kong is a civilized and liberal society the way we think it is, then we should confer upon everybody the same right. While we're debating this private Columbaria bill, we have to ponder this issue and see whether these minority people, these vulnerable people should be protected, should be respected. This is not a Trojan horse, and this is not any threat at all. We say that we cannot be compassionate to the beast. I'm sure that not just the Pandam members, the pro-establishment members would feel bad about this remark. Please do not use the wrong analogy. Junius Ho can easily turn into Christopher Zhong. You cannot achieve any purpose in this debate, and you're shifting the attention. Of opening up the floodgate of a same-sex marriage. This morning, I was touched by Mr. Raymond Chan's remarks. He was in tears, but these are really genuine tears. We're not intensifying the conflicts. We're not trying to achieve this overnight. We're not trying to embark on a debate on same-sex marriage. This is a very modest and humble demand. For the sexual minority, why do you think that this is something that would touch the raw nerve, and you will not allow this to happen? Now, the pro-establishment members said that we should not follow Taiwan in everything that they do, but everybody is born equal. This is the universal value. This is the way to go, and this is the international trend. Everybody should enjoy the freedom that they're born with. I don't really want to get into this kind of debate. But if you come out of this and ask people about this, and if you ask them a loaded question, if you support this, then it will lead to a legalization of same-sex marriage. Of course, they will object to it, but if you guide them by saying that if you allow them this amendment, they will only be able to be allowed to claim the ashes of their loved ones. Now, I can't imagine how heartless and how warped that you are in making the accusation that we're launching a stealth attack, that you are accusing us that this is the first step, this is a slippery slope, and the next thing we want is to ask for legalization of same-sex marriage. Nobody said anything like that. We're merely asking for the right for them to claim the ashes. I just can't imagine why this led to the story of the old man and the wolf. I think the old man will be turning in his grave if he hears what Mr. Junius Ho said. This story can be open to so many different interpretations. If the old man is listening in to the debate, being a compassionate person that he is, he would not raise an objection at all. Now, I understand that we can have cuts and thrusts of a debate. It doesn't really matter, but there are certainly some minorities, some vulnerable people who need protection. And if you rub salt to their wound, indeed, some may be experiencing some bereavement involving their same-sex partner, we should not be making these kind of remarks as LegCo members. Everything we do, every word we utter, will become the platform for pursuing future policies. But if we use inappropriate analogies, if we pin the wrong label on the minority, then if you turn the situation around and if you're in a minority, how would you feel? I must emphasize again that we're not debating for 1 minute the legalization of same-sex marriage. When we ran for election, I said to Mr. Hon Chow that there is no such advocacy in community, and Mr. Hon Chow would latch on this issue at every opportunity. I wonder whether this is further widening the rift or whether it is healing the rift. As Mr. Stephen Ho said, pro-establishment members may not have strong views, maybe they don't have unified views. This is a free, liberal debate, but in any case, we cannot hurt the minority. We cannot label them as beasts. Ms. Claudia Mo.